Hey, good afternoon, everyone. State Representative Emanuel, Chris Welch here. Thank you for joining me for another Sunday edition of my Facebook Live conversations. You're going to enjoy this conversation here today for the next half hour or so. One of my friends, the assessor from Cook County, is joining us. He's going to have a whole lot of helpful information. So you want to sit tight for the next half hour, share this video with your friends and family so that they can receive this helpful information as well. I also want to, encourage everyone to continue to stay home and stay inside. Coronavirus is still very much out there in the atmosphere, and we need to continue to wear our masks when we do go out of our homes and practice social distancing. As we can see across the South, they are at a tipping point in at least 7 states. This thing is very much alive, and we are in the first wave. We're not in the second wave. Coronavirus is very much still alive, and it's extremely important that we continue to follow the guidelines. That is why we started these Facebook Live conversations, so that we can all stay at home, still receive helpful information on how government can help you and be of service to you. And today, I am truly honored to welcome my guest for a conversation for the next half hour, Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi. Prior to beginning his career in Cook County government, Fritz spent more than 20 years valuing assets as a mutual fund portfolio manager and analyst. In his 13 years at Columbia Wenger Asset Management, Fritz served as a financial steward, helping average families save for retirement and focusing on small companies operating around the world. Since assuming office in 2008, he has been exceptional. He's been busy all over the county. He has brought fairness, ethics, and transparency to the Cook County Assessor's Office with a vision focused on operational changes, technological upgrades, and the elimination of favoritism. Highlights of his first year in office include the public release of all assessment modeling code and data, an external audit of the office, the passage of the law that makes senior exemptions renew automatically, which totally just made sense, the modernization of online exemptions and appeal filings, and a new collaborative approach to property valuations to increase predictability and spur investment in Chicago and Cook County. Fritz was born and raised in the Hyde Park neighborhood in Chicago. He makes his home today in Oak Park with his wife, who is a school teacher, and his 3 children. Please welcome our guest today, the Honorable Assessor of Cook County, Assessor Fritz Kaegi. Welcome. How are you, my friend?
Hey, thanks for having me here. And I wanted to thank everyone who's at home watching this on a Sunday afternoon, and it's beautiful. And I really welcome you being here on the call, and hopefully we can pass along some good information and get your questions answered.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you joining me from your home. That is your home. That's not a fancy backdrop, is it?
No, this is my home. I have a library here that has lots of room for my books, and that's kind of what sealed the deal when we were looking at houses here in Oak Park. My book got the rest of the run of the house.
Well, let me ask you, I asked the home question purposefully, because how are you and your family holding up during COVID-19? Your wife's a school teacher. You got 3 small children. How's that going?
All told, we're counting our blessings that we have everything we have, and we're holding up okay. You know, the kids, they're actually kind of happy, I think, because they like having us parents at home and not having to go to school. We go a little bit stir crazy, but we're counting our blessings. We've had some neighbors who had COVID, and I just want to amplify what you said. This is a dangerous, contagious pandemic. One of my neighbors, very lucky to be alive. He was in ICU and still on crutches more than a month later. So folks got to be careful. My dad lives in a senior home, in a senior building down in Hyde Park. And we're very lucky that he has so many people around him that are so careful and mindful of not just about themselves, but what, if they engage in riskiness, how they endanger others. And I think that's the attitude we all should have.
That's right. That's right. Assessor, let's jump right to the order of the day. You are the assessor. You are now in your second year as the Cook County assessor. Many folks that we talk to don't even know what the assessor does. Can you tell us a little bit about the position? How does it impact my next door neighbors, your next door neighbors, and all the residents of Cook County? And why did you run for this little known position?
Sure. Well, the assessor's office is one part of the property tax system, and it's really the equity part of the property tax system. It determines each assessment, and the total assessed value in your community determines your share of the amount of taxes, property taxes, that have to be collected in your community. So it's really important. This office is really important to make sure that you're only paying your fair share, that everyone is paying their fair share. And the reason why I ran is that I thought the system was broken. It was failing. From talking to some of the folks I grew up with, I went to Kenwood Academy down in Hyde Park and the CPS, and a lot of my friends had moved to the south suburbs and told me about how the system had been so unfair. And I learned a lot and realized that, hey, there are ways to make this system more equitable so it doesn't have the disparities and problems that it had. And I realized a lot of my background was really suited for all of the changes that were needed. We needed an ethical upgrade. We needed new codes. We needed new transparency. We needed a complete reworking of our evaluation models to make it more fair. And we needed new technology. And I thought it would be really energizing to take that on. And it has been. And working with partners like you, it's been amazing how far we've come in just 18 months. Yeah,
you've done quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to getting into that. Everyone, I'm talking with Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi. He is new to the job, but he has hit the ground running. And we are live today on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you are watching this, please share it because you want to hear the information that our assessor is going to give out because it really is useful, helpful information. Assessors, since I've been a legislator, one of my biggest events is normally around this time of year. People have received their property tax bills. Our office is getting lots of calls and visitors. And this year's different. So, we're still operating under COVID-19 guidelines, but the emails and the calls are still coming. We normally have a workshop, and that's because people really are concerned about their property tax bills. Even though we haven't had the event, people are emailing and calling and screaming about their property taxes. In your opinion, this is what you do. This is what you're monitoring. Why are property taxes so high in Illinois? And specifically, why are they so high in Cook County?
Well, yes, it's a very good thing to talk about. And actually, the assessor's office doesn't affect the amount of taxes that are collected overall. Those are determined by our taxing bodies. And the reason why property taxes are high is basically about 2/3 of property taxes are for schools. And in the state, but not only the state, also the federal government has basically made communities be on their own for schools. The federal government provides less than 10% of the budgets for our school districts, and the state of Illinois is number 50 in the United States for providing support for school districts. And so that leaves school districts on their own to pay for schools, and school districts really only have the property tax as their only tool to collect. And that's why property taxes are some of the highest in the nation in Illinois, and the other states where they're high, they kind of have the same problems. But there are a lot of things that we can do to fix this. We don't want to have an assessment system that makes taxes even higher on people through inefficiency, disparities, bad data, bad modeling. In the past, I think our assessment system has made this problem worse by having a lot of these problems embedded, which is why I ran and why I got elected in the office.
Well, I mean, what are some of your specific initiatives to help decrease the property tax burden on homeowners?
Sure. So first of all, the key thing that we can do is make sure that we are assessing everyone fairly. And the standard by which we do this, we're supposed to do this in our state, is what's the market value for everyone's property? And then that determines each property owner's share of the amount of tax that has to be collected in that community. And so when our data is inadequate to that task, when we're missing some elements of the data that are required to do that, that leads to disparities. And usually the average homeowner, the more modest you are, the more you end up paying freight for others who know how to work that system. So fixing that is a really key part of doing a better job with that too. Modeling with it so that we don't have disparities built into our modeling once we fix the data part is really key. So we've put a really close eye on measuring disparities. That's why we brought in an auditor. That's why we created a whole new data science department. And then we make ourselves accountable by putting our models out there for everyone to inspect. We think that's a really important thing so that people can hold us to our words and then also help us by showing us where, hey, you're missing something that's creating inequity here or creating a disparity. So we want to be accountable in that way. And then the third thing that we've done is we've tried to make sure that everyone gets the exemptions that they're entitled to. And so you were one of the people who was helped responsible for passing that automatic renewal, the senior exemption. We really appreciated all the great work we had with House leadership. This had been something that you would think is common sense, but hadn't got done for over a decade. And with Representative Crespo, with you, with other members of House leadership, we finally got that done because of the data work that we've done. So now hundreds of thousands of seniors in Cook County get that exemption automatically renewed. We did that last year. And then this year, we built on that knowledge and that insight, and we added in new automatic renewals for seniors with disabilities, veterans with disabilities, and the senior freeze. Now, it's only for COVID, but still, that's really helped people. And then lastly, serving the public in all of this is better. We inherited a system that was very paper-based. We're very proud of all the work that we've done in putting online appeals, online exemptions, a whole new website. This has really been a heaven sent for us in COVID. If we didn't have those in place, it would have been very hard to adjust.
Absolutely. I got a quick question for you because your office is the Cook County Assessor's office. There's also the Cook County Board of Review. How does your office differ from the Cook County Board of Review? Can you explain that to a taxpayer?
Yeah, so for a taxpayer, they should know that we start the process. So when we reassess the county, as we're doing in our part of the county this year, so Proviso, Township, South in Cook County is being reassessed this year, and we start that. We send out notices, and this year, because of COVID, we paused sending out notices, so people are getting them a little bit later during this year than they normally would, but we're the first assessment district in the nation to be taking into account COVID in our work. Now, we will be doing that, but if a taxpayer is not happy with the assessment they got, if they think we made an error, or if we didn't assess them right, they have a right to appeal to our office. And if they still feel like they aren't getting a fair shake, they can go to the second appeal body, which is called the Board of Review, and then file a claim based on that. And so that's part of our assessment system. And then once the Board of Review is done, then the cycle is almost complete, and then the county clerk's office can calculate the rates. So, and that sort of illustrates that assessments are one part of the system, but then the county clerk is taking into account all the levies from all the local taxing districts to determine the rate that faces you. Because again, it's neither us nor the Board of Review determine the taxes that have to be collected. We're basically determining your share of the tax that have to be paid.
So in the midst of the pandemic, many people were surprised to still receive their property tax bills a couple weeks ago. And yes, government is still functioning, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic. And so people obviously are looking at those numbers and saying, oh my gosh, I want to appeal. Can people still appeal their property tax assessments? Is it too late for that?
Well, the short answer is people can appeal their assessments, but that will only impact their taxes next year because of this long cycle. You asked about the Board of Review. the assessments that we sent out last year and that the board review took appeals on, that was all completed earlier this year, and then it rolls into the tax bill that is sent out now. So basically, the assessments that happen this year affect taxes next year. But it behooves everyone in a reassessment year like we're in now in South Cook County from Proviso South to make sure that when they get that assessment notice that it's fair, that it's accurate, and if there's a problem, make sure you avail yourself of your opportunities there. Now, another thing they can do is make sure that they got on their tax bill to see if they got all the exemptions that they're supposed to get. If they did not get those exemptions, they can talk to our office, they can work with you, and we can issue something called a certificate of error for the amount of tax that is overbilled on the tax bill, and essentially print out a new bill for this year. So people can, that's the thing that people can do that affects their tax bill this year. The other thing that we did is, because we know COVID has turned the whole world upside down, we worked with other countywide officials like Treasurer Maria Pappas to make sure that although the taxes are due August 1st, that the date from which late fees start has been pushed back 2 months to October. So that's part of providing the relief that we can. I think it's important to remember that all the public health authorities like Cook County, which is the safety net hospital for our whole county, your local boards of public health, your local schools, this is the property tax is how we pay for that. They're providing the stopping power against the virus right now, especially because the federal government has abdicated so much. So it's important that we have those defenses in place and that we're starting to turn this around. And so property taxes, unfortunately, are the way they fund themselves.
Yeah, you said a lot there, Assessor. I want to just break it down in a couple of quick little nugget questions. First of all, if you appeal your assessment now, that's for going forward. It's not for the property tax bills that we recently received, correct?
That is correct.
And the property tax bills that we received recently, they are due August 1st, but if you pay them late, the legislature in our special pandemic session, based on a bill led by the treasurer and yourself, we waived the late penalties until October 1st? October
1st, yeah. So it was pushed back 2 months.
Excellent. And so
some people are pay their mortgages through their escrows, but for people who don't, that's an important element of relief for people at a time like this.
People have a lot of questions regarding property tax assessments, property tax bills. As you know, when they get them twice a year, that's when the questions really come forward. I received an invitation from your office recently about satellite office hours you're conducting. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we have worked really hard to have workshops online available for people so they can, just like we're doing right now, you can talk, you can hear a presentation on how to do this. We walk it through you step by step, and then you can ask questions there. But we know not everyone has the availability to do things over Zoom like we're doing now. Sometimes you need that. The nature of what you're doing requires an in-person visit. So first of all, you can schedule an in-person appointment at our office now. I have personally supervised the safety procedures in place. We have very strict procedures downtown. It is safe to come. We have all our employees in protective gear with masks. We have appointment-only visits, limited capacity, shields up. And we're doing this to serve folks who need to come in, and we're doing this at our satellite office in Markham and in Skokie as well. And you can schedule those same appointments, and actually the wait will probably be easier to schedule something at a time convenient for you if you go to the Markham office. And then we're also making ourselves available to district offices of all our representatives to schedule a time where you can work with the staff member either remotely like this or in person at your district office if you are taking in-person visits to help with that, specifically with those exemptions, to make sure that you got all the exemptions that you deserve. There's one thing I wanted to mention about the reassessments. We're sending out the notices in proviso on August 11th. So people who are in your district are probably mostly in Proviso Township. They will get those notices in mid-August, and you should look there to see if that's a price, a market price, if we've estimated it right, if it makes sense to you, and then compare it with your neighbors. And that can be grounds for appeal if you feel like you're not getting the same shake that your neighbors get.
So my district is about 80% Proviso Township and 20% River Forest Township.
I see.
Where's River Forest Township in that?
River Forest has been completed, and the appeal cycle is also complete. What a person in River Forest Township can look to see you can look their property up on our website at cookcountyassessor.com to see how your property has been valued. We have added on a COVID adjustment for River Forest from the assessment notice that you would have received earlier this year. Everyone got it, regardless of whether they appealed or not. So go look at your property on cookcountyassessor.com, and you can look it up. And if you feel like through this whole process we still haven't gotten it right, this is where going to the board review is an appropriate next step.
If I made an appointment for satellite office hours, I think one of the first questions I would ask assessors is, do I need a lawyer? I mean, I get mailings all the time from lawyers about this process. Is this something I need to hire a lawyer for, or can I do it myself?
You absolutely do not need to. And the reason why is that all of these decisions are based on data, and you are the expert on your own home. And it's 100% likely that you know more about your home than we do. So all you have to do is submit the data that supports your case for lowering your assessment, or you don't even have to do that. Like, we will do a whole other set of checks to make sure that you're assessed in the same way as others with houses like yours, and you don't need a lawyer to do that. If you want some help, you have folks in your district can use their township assessor, which is free. And you can, if you need some hand holding, if you feel intimidated by this, and I don't blame people because there's a lot of the intricacies of our legal system are complex. There are a lot of terms that people don't understand. Your township assessor is a free resource there for you. They're really good, and they're free. So folks should use them if they need some handholding, but you absolutely don't need a lawyer, because this is ultimately about data, and you don't need a lawyer to navigate any of that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Assessor, because in Proviso Township, I work very closely with our Township Assessor, Stephen Sawaski, and his office, and I encourage people all the time to reach out to the Township Assessor's office, because it is something you can do yourself for free. I've taken advantage of their services, and it takes you 5-10 minutes of your time. Please reach out to Proviso Township's Assessor's office and ask for Roxanne Lexus and tell her, Chris Welch sent you.
They work really hard. They've got great expertise, and people in the suburbs are really lucky they have them, because people in the city don't have the equivalent of the township assessor. So they're a really special resource. They're consumer advocates. They're there for you.
That's right. Here's another question I would have for you out of satellite office hours. I saw an article last week. I texted you and you responded right away. There was an article in Mother Jones that talked about Black families seem to pay more in their property taxes and in their assessed higher. Yet another area where the Black community is disproportionately impacted. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why I ran, why the public embraced what we were talking to, because they know these disparities exist. And there are two important disparities. We can address one. The other one is something that I'm personally raising my voice on, but we all need to work on together to fix it. Disparities in our assessment system are when there is a systematic bias against minority groups, especially Black and Latinos, or against people who don't speak English as a native language, or when there's a systematic disparity against more modestly priced properties. And that has been found to exist in Cook County by many different third-party studies. And basically what it means is that either intentionally or unintentionally through gaps in the data or models that were flawed, or some people knowing how to work the system who had more money, who were more proximate to power. They could whittle their piece of the pie into something that was real small, and it came at the expense of everyone else. The way we fix this is, first of all, you can't fix disparities like that through appeals. It's got to be done, because the more appeals you get, basically you end up having wealthier, more powerful people whittling away their piece at the expense of everyone else. So how do you fix this? You've got to make sure that the assessments at the outset are fair and non-biased. And this is why we've worked so hard on discovering gaps in our data, because we know gaps tend to increase disparities. The more we can reduce those gaps in data, the more fair the system will be. This is why we've worked so hard to rebuild our data, to do better field work. We've had an important bill that we worked on together. You were one of the co-sponsors of the data modernization bill in the state legislature. It passed out of the Senate by bipartisan supermajority last year. We'll keep on pushing it in the House. And also transparency is very important, so that we're showing our work so people can examine, are there things that are creating disparities here? Like, have we not measured the flood risk of someone who's potentially hurt by flooding on the Des Plaines River? I know folks in Bellwood who have been affected by that. So that's the kind of thing that we want to make sure that we're measuring. Third of all, the key is like having us be examined by third parties so that we can see they're making progress on this. So this is audits, this is statistical measurements that we report to the public. That is an important way. But here's the other thing that really creates disparity. Even if we get those assessments 100% perfect, there will still be an outrageous disparity in place. And that's in rates. Why? Because of segregation, and because of the way that market values can embed racism, Black communities tend to have property values that are lower. But they still have to pay for the same kind of cost for supporting their schools. And so you have a lower property value base that has to support the same amount of spending. And that makes rates much higher. I was appalled to discover when I looked at the rates out this year and in past years that there are 132 municipalities in Cook County. The top 20 in terms of rates are all majority Black.
Yep. A couple of them right here in Proviso Township
are 3 times the rest of the county. That is enormously destructive to building wealth. I mean, if people who are in the world of investing know that if your average housing value rises 4% per year, but someone's wealth, they have to pay a rate that's 2 or 3 times what everyone else does, that could completely eliminate the possibility of appreciation in their home. And it's even made worse by the fact that Black families, their wealth, to the extent it exists, is almost all in their home. And so this falls particularly hard on Black families. So how do we solve this, Chris? You've been an important part of this because you helped to get us past the new school funding formula in Illinois.
That's right.
The way we reduce these disparities is we get dollars coming into school districts, not through property taxes, but from other sources. So changing that school funding formula in Illinois was a first step. Getting more money into the school funding formula is the next step. And that's why the fair tax proposition that is up for a referendum in the general election this year is important, because it will give the state a tool to fund and reduce that disparity. Third, we should never leave the federal government off the hook here. An important part of the civil rights struggle, going back to A. Philip Randolph, was we need federal support for education of the disadvantaged, because we know our current system leads to segregation and leads to disparities. The way you address that is we need to get more federal money into our schools. And it's not a lot of money. If the federal government just added another $15 billion into federal support for disadvantaged schools, it could lead to a 10% or more reduction in the school levy. In some parts of Western and Southern Cook County, even more than that. And so There is a big movement building for this. The CARES Act that the Congress passed as part of COVID relief helped a little bit. We have to keep pushing on this. You and I know that the state has a lot of fiscal problems. It's not going to be a panacea. The federal government is really one that can make a big difference with not a lot of money to reduce that disparity, reduce the burden that falls on everyone.
Assessor, I see I'm out of time, but I have about 3 more questions. Can you give me about 5 more minutes of your time?
Yeah, I'm good. Let's roll. I'm really glad everyone's here, so let's continue the conversation.
I appreciate it. You're really giving us some good information, and I appreciate you taking some time on your Sunday afternoon. My question regarding basically commercial properties. Have you had an opportunity to talk to the owners of commercial properties to see how they can help you help regular homeowners in this process?
Definitely. So from the time that we had our transition after we won the primary to up to this point, we've had lots of discussion and cooperation with commercial property owners. We have a weekly opportunity to meet with senior staff with commercial property owners, and this is especially geared to the smaller ones who are probably hurt by when we don't have data that's suited to smaller properties. Some of the data that we have is better suited to the bigger properties, but sometimes the small ones, we live in such an amazingly diverse and interesting world that's so different. We have so many different kinds of special properties that meeting with us, bringing data to us helps us do that. We created a commercial data portal this year that's really important for those small businesses. Every commercial property owner in South Cook received a login number this year where they could submit information to us before we've started the assessment process. That saves them money, that saves them time, that saves them uncertainty when we get that right, and they don't have to use the appeals process to solve some basic mistakes we might have made because we didn't have the data. We had a market analyst day this year where we invited the whole commercial real estate community in, where we did this together with the city of Chicago and helped them work better on projecting what the impact of assessment changes can be. The city talked about its outlook for levies and what kind of money it will need to be putting into the CPS in the future. And that helps people make good investment decisions on the commercial side. And we're going to be creating an advisory council called the Valuation Council, where we'll have another venue that'll be chaired by Don Meyer, who's been our Chief Valuation Officer, to make sure that we're covering all our bases, that people have a chance to be heard.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Now, this is something that you mentioned early on, and I'm very passionate about, and that's diversity on corporate boards. You've written an op-ed in support of legislation that I filed. I've written in support of legislation that you've supported. But this corporate board diversity stuff, this is something I'm really passionate about. In fact, this week I announced another piece of legislation targeting corporate board diversity on banks. We want banks to have at least 20% people of color on their bank boards. And I just believe that those more diverse bank boards will make them make better investment decisions in communities of color. Can you tell us why you have supported corporate board diversity in your professional career and why it's so important?
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned in the introduction, before I was Cook County Assessor, I was a global investor. And so I managed money and we invested in publicly traded companies in the United States and around the world. And one of the things that I know from that experience is diverse boards do better because they're consciously thinking about things and biases that people might not have occurred to them. That if some people think that if you should just behave in a colorblind manner, that then everything will solve for itself and we'll all be better off. You need to lean in to disparities. If you have a workforce that is overwhelmingly male or white, as many industries do, especially in finance, you miss a lot of things, and that ends up creating distortions and disparities in priorities that should not exist. And your legislation is so important because I know from my own 2 decades of experience is that these companies will not change on their own. And even if shareholders want them to change, they won't change on their own because the managements of these companies are insulated from shareholder influence. And so, having the public demand this, but also having our government, which represents the public, move this along is very important. And the other thing I wanted to add, and I mentioned in that op-ed, is that many countries around the world have figured this out. They've realized that change will not happen on its own. In many countries in Europe, but not only Europe, but also Canada, and even in countries that have suffered many disparities of their own, like India and South Africa, they have had measures like this that have really helped things. And so this is why we need this here. It doesn't come at the expense of profitability. It usually moves companies forward and helps them discover opportunities that they didn't even know were there.
That's absolutely right. Well, Assessor, I appreciate you for helping me get that legislation through, and your op-ed, I think, was very instrumental in getting the governor on board, and a lot of folks are really behind the initiative. Folks have already started reporting their corporate board makeup to the Secretary of State, and we're on to the next phase with focusing on banks and their diversity. I want to ask you about your office, though. I want to, before we leave here, last question. Tell us about the makeup of your office. Since you've joined Cook County government as the assessor, the CEO of the assessor's office, what does your leadership team look like? What's the demographics of your staff?
Well, we're very proud of my team. So the number 2 person in our office, the chief deputy assessor, Sarah Garza-Resnick, who's a Latino woman. And she's an amazing person leading, and we have a commitment to improve the diversity that we have. The number 3 person in our office, our chief administrative officer, is Kimberly Harris Mooring, who's a Black woman who comes from the private sector, who worked for a local bank, and knows that we just can't behave in a colorblind way if we're going to improve diversity in areas like that we draw upon. So we draw upon people who have valuation skills, which is finance. We draw upon people in the tech industry. We know these industries have incredible disparities already, so that we have to really lean into how we recruit, how we hire, make sure that opportunities are available every step of the way, and that we are conscious of them as we make these decisions. And we brought in one of the few Black assessors in the United States to come work with us, who's the assessor at Philadelphia in our valuations department. And we continue to work at this. So we think some of the most important work we can do is at the top of the recruiting funnel. We're doing a lot of recruiting now and making sure that we're reaching out to not only the higher education like Chicago State and city colleges, but also we re-examine our job description so that if we can hire someone who doesn't have a college degree, but they do have meet the other requirements, let's do that. Let's not build in things that create an additional barrier. I want to continue to work at Cook County so that as part of the civil service hiring process, we have a Rooney Rule in place, which means that if we have a pool of applicants that is overwhelmingly white, say, let's make sure that at least the people that we're interviewing, there are representatives of minorities there, so that we're not replicating a skewed pool when we invite people in for interviews. That's called a Rooney Rule. I think it's very important. I'm going to work on that. That's something that's currently under the county code, not allowed, but I'm going to be pushing for that as well.
Well, keep pushing, Assessor. Thank you for all the work that you do. I appreciate you giving us your time on a Sunday afternoon to talk about these important issues. And please tell your wife, Rebecca, and your 3 kids that we appreciate them allowing us to borrow you for this important 40 minutes here this afternoon.
Well,
thank you so much.
Happy to do it. It's a pleasure to join all of you. You guys are hardcore. Happy to come back anytime.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in as well. As always, it's been a great conversation. I hope you all are staying safe, stay home, stay safe. If you do go outside, please make sure you're wearing a face covering. Until then, till next time, you guys take care.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Fritz.